Okay, now as a company, we have come up with a list of reasons why students would miss a question. And the first one is based off of content. They may ask you a question that you're completely unfamiliar with. So if you are weaker in statistics and they give you a statistics question, you may not know how to answer that question. Now, if you have completed Algebra 2 at public school or private school, you have covered 99% of the material that they are going to ask you. So missing a question based off content is going to be somewhat rare. The biggest area that students make their mistakes, and this is where you're going to make have the biggest potential to improve your score, is paying attention to execution. Now this means that you understood the concept, okay, so you understand the concept that was being tested, but for some reason you made a mistake. You either added wrong or subtracted wrong or multiplied wrong or something like that. And so a common example that I see is students will do 3 squared, and the correct answer is obviously 9, 3 times 3, but they'll rush through and they'll do 3 squared is equal to 6 or something like that, where they do 3 times 2 instead of 3 times 3. So if we can avoid those, that amounts to a few more questions that you can get right. And you may misread the question. This is common as well. Most of the time students find these questions to be more the students think the questions are more complicated than they really are. And so they tend to misread the questions, and if they had read it correctly, the question's, a 30-second question. Okay, so be aware of this, because each additional question on the SAT math section is approximately 10 points, right? And in my experience working with students individually is that they make between 5 and 8 mistakes per test. And so that means that if you just minimize your mistakes, your scores will go up by 50 to 80 points, right? Now you would agree that going from a 550 to a 600 or a 630 just mentally seems a lot better, right? And so be aware of those execution errors. Okay, the third reason that students would miss a question is pure psychology, and there's really 2 types of psychology. One is from the test maker's perspective. They design questions beautifully, and they are experts at math, there's no doubt about it, but they're also experts at psychology. And whether you're shooting for a 600 or a 700 or an 800, they know exactly how to write a question to trip you up, right? And this is where we have to be fundamentally sound, we have to check our answers, and we have to practice, right? We have to practice and practice to understand how they are writing questions and how they are doing this. I often joke that I would love to have lunch with the people who write these tests, because they do things and they understand things that are amazing about how students think. The second type of psychology is personal psychology, and that is when you look at a question and it looks really complicated, and you convince yourself, I don't know how to do this. And this happens a lot for students who are a little bit less confident at math. And when I see a couple of paragraphs, I generally realize that this question is going to be fairly easy. They're trying to intimidate me by putting a lot more text, and all I have to do is be patient, read through the question, and a lot of times the math is going to be very easy. I get more worried about those one-line questions where it's deceptively simple. It looks really easy, but it turns out to be a bit more challenging. Okay, so be aware of that as you go through the test. How big of a role does psychology play in your own situation when you're approaching test questions?